the push in the system initially was, and in fairness to the GPs, this is a huge amount of pressure on the GPs to provide, 40, how many would you say, 50 different templates, an insane level of information requests. And I do think that the market has increasingly tried to trend towards, refining those templates to standardize them, but they are still not standardized. And so, the GP pushback is, listen, what are you doing with all of this data? Because, you can't possibly do it enough, at least that's their interpretation, enough analysis, or the right analysis based on the information you're asking for. I'm not sure that's entirely true. Of course, that's why they continue to get pushback and they continue to have to provide that information to us. But transparency in my mind means, it's not just a question of how do you think about each of the investments that you've made. In other words, tell me what investments are made and help me understand it from a growth standpoint, but I also want to see it from a net standpoint. And that to me is one of the huge disconnects. And I probably commented on this over the years that I sit at a table and somebody throws gross numbers at me and I say, no, net. So it's kind of that fundamental basics, but then it's also help me to understand how you actually constructed that portfolio. I mean, we're kind of quant junkies, so we that's what motivates us, and we might be at the kind of far end of, wanting data and being able to analyze it, but I do think there's a measure of you need to be able to express to your investors, those who are giving you money, how are you actually generating those returns?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things to Andrea's point about wrong calculations on IRR. Certainly, when we had that report come out about a year and a half ago, that 54% or something of GPs were miscalculating the amount of carry because they didn't understand how the waterfall worked, or there was carelessness. I mean, nobody was suggesting that any of this was deliberate, but clearly there was a disconnect somewhere. So clearly in all of those cases, there was a misreporting of the net IRR number at some level. I would also say there's often been, or there had been, a lack of transparency sometimes from consultants and LPs as to how they were looking at numbers. We had a case where we presented numbers and we were told that we were completely off on the quartile and we couldn't understand it. And the group in question said, well, we have a team that does our analytics and, we can't reveal that. So
it's our secret.
Yeah, exactly.
We got some secrets too.
No, but so we had an issue. We were a bit stuck on this, and we ended up having one of our young folks check in with somebody on the analytics team, and then casually they were just talking about the methodology, and it became clear that they were essentially netting net numbers. So they were applying a layer of fees and removing that to get to their ultimate answer. So obviously, we had to have a constructive conversation in which it was revealed that maybe it would be better to do it this way without pointing out their mistake. And it helped us at the end of the day, but we had to have that dialogue. Without that, we had no idea what they were doing.
So Shant, when you were a CFO and wearing that hat, this discussion around the confidence that you have in your performance numbers and what you're reporting was meaningful to you.
Sure.
You want to talk a little bit about that and how what transparency looks like to you today?
Well, again, I mean, the most important thing that you can do with your GP-LP relationship is make sure that there's trust, and that's the way you build long-term relationships. And so you have to work with your LPs as to what it is that they actually need, understanding their objectives and working with them to try to get them to those end goals. There are some times where you do have to draw the line. There are such things as unreasonable requests that is just busy work for my team, which is already lean and mean and has a lot of demands on them. So, with exception, you do have to push back from time to time. But generally, if your LP is asking you for information, there's a reason behind it, and you should support them and provide that. So we've been, pretty flexible with working with them. We've adopted a lot of tools to try to help us gather that information and to create a history bank of data for us. I will say, we just launched our fundraising process. We spent a lot of time preparing the data room before we opened it with standardized DDQs, cash flows, all of these things that we had been hearing about is what LPs are looking for, so that we can save time and it's more efficient. Of course, when Andrea asks me to fill out her customized DDQ, I do that too. But nonetheless, 90% of the investors will work with an ILPA standardized DDQ now. Now, there may be things on there that I'm not prepared to provide at this stage to some newcomer investor. Breakdown of carry, your budget, your financial projections, your budget. But that's something you could offer to provide if they make it to the next stage and they're seriously looking with you, and then you can sit down with them and go over those types of more confidential information. So from our standpoint, we're pretty flexible about what investors need and providing it to them.